ships, which continue to lead to significant maritime insecurity in the region. As you will hopefully see in Guy Platin's video message to the conference tomorrow, the shipping industry is fully supportive of initiatives that can guarantee long-term stability across the Gulf of Guinea and which allow the region to secure and stabilize its waters, so that they can take full advantage of the benefits which the blue economy can offer. These efforts include the Yaoundé Code of Conduct and related projects to implement it across the region, along with several other projects ongoing. Maritime domain awareness and situational awareness are vital to deal with maritime insecurity, and the industry continues to fully support cooperation between all countries of the region and their non-regional state partners, including the IMO, who does a great deal of work with the region. Constructive and insightful. The impact of maritime insecurity on seafarers, who are indispensable to seaborne trade in the Gulf of Guinea and other regions of the world, was sadly, at least in part, overlooked. Industry representatives in the audience were somewhat disappointed to hear allegations or suspicions that shipping companies could in any way be involved in any of these cases, reportedly to increase freight rates and insurance premiums. And here I'm referring in particular to conclusion number 17 from panel 1, which we would kindly request be removed. There were also suggestions that shipping company employees, which we understood to mean seafarers, should be vetted as well, and that is also reflected in conclusion recommendation 17.
Something like ICC should be made to operate in a more effective manner by providing it with the resources and the funding it requires, both material and financial, to be able to function effectively. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Good morning, everyone. Yeah, my name is Okongo George. I'm the Director General for Kenya Maritime Authority. First, I would like to thank the organizers of the event for a good job so far that they've done. 2 points that I have. I did take part in panel 1, and there are 2 issues that I want to share. One, which I believe that they should have formed part of the recommendation. Classification of intelligence reports. I think there is need for us to check that we don't overclassify intelligence reports. Secondly, issues were also raised on how best to engage our youths such that they don't engage themselves in acts of criminality. So I thought those are 2 points that at least that should have been covered in the recommendation. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir.
Good morning.
Due to time constraints, we'll take just 2 more comments. Please, I beg you to make it short. We shall have another plenary session and another one tomorrow. So if there are further observations, please, you can direct them to the desk of the rapporteurs. We'll capture it appropriately and then present them during the next panel. But for now, we can take 2 more.
Thank you. My name is Leke Oyewole, former advisor to President Jonathan. I want to talk more about the maritime domain awareness. NASDA, like I mentioned yesterday, has a very robust capacity to deliver to the entire sub-region, including tracking those vessels that switch off their AIS. But beyond this, it is pertinent to recognize the territorial nature of states and even agencies within the states. In order to conquer this, a very robust maritime domain awareness should be such that will capture details of happenings in the waters of each nation and streamed to all the agencies concerned, with responsibilities placed on the stakeholders to ensure that issues of infraction are addressed. If not, it should be recorded and let people in due course also know how many times such things have happened. This will put agencies on their heels and ensure that issues are addressed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. The last one.
I want to make observation on the recommendation, one of recommendation that came out from panel 3 that is not captured and is so crucial to this forum, because it's one sure way of operationalizing the cooperation between ECAS and ECOWAS. A recommendation came up that the nation state should consider setting up an African Maritime Task Force with member states contributing platforms. This will be, it will help to create a kind of law enforcement mechanism that is free from sovereign and jurisdictional and diplomatic encumbrance, so that they can operate seamlessly along the waters of the Gulf of Guinea. We've also observed that the criminals, they don't respect this maritime boundary. So our response, law enforcement response, should also be seamless enough to catch up with the criminals' activities. So setting up this maritime command is very crucial, and we need to capture it in our recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Please bring the microphone to the DG NIMASA.
Your Excellencies, the Chief of Naval Staff of Nigeria, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, mine is a suggestion, and I don't know how that works. If we could send the recommendations of the various panels, the presentation you just made, to the email of all participants this morning, and between now and the end of the day, they're able to read the recommendations. You send them an email where they will make their comments, send a feedback. Then the team of rapporteurs can look at the feedback, so that at plenary tomorrow, it will be an easier job for your team. I don't know how that works. Send it by email to all participants, and if possible, translated to the 3 working languages of English, French, and Portuguese. They all get it in their emails. Give them an email that they will send their feedback. So tomorrow morning during plenary, you factor the various feedbacks. We could now have time for robust discussion. That way, we'll save time. I'm conscious of the fact that working group sections or thematic sections are supposed to start by 9. So we're technically 15 minutes behind. The way I'm looking at it, by the time people settle down, we end up starting by 9:30. I don't know if that works with your team. Thank you very much.
Perfectly, sir. With this, we've come to the end of this session. Thank you very much.
Je suis Philippe, team leader pour le projet WICAPS. C'est un projet donc lancé par la Commission européenne qui est conduit par Expertise France. Et le but, c'est de renforcer la sûreté dans les ports africains de Dakar, Pointe-Noire. Nous avons pour ça un programme sur 4 ans, donc on va être très présent dans tous les ports africains pendant 4 ans. Et en fait, on est sur un partenariat avec les ports africains, à savoir qu'on va vers eux pour leur demander quels sont leurs besoins et pour réduire les menaces qu'ils peuvent avoir tous les jours, aussi bien dans, bien sûr, la traduction du colis espèces, mais aussi les menaces civiles sur les matières dangereuses, les transferts de matières et nous aurons également un volet de support c'est-à-dire pour les dans la réglementation portuaire. Pardon?
Je dis, si vous parlez au problème ici du West Afrique, de l'Ouest.
Nous allons des connexions c'est un budget européen. Donc nous allons assurer avec les qui sont en pleine croissance. En Côte d'Ivoire, pardon, pas Catégorie, c'est San Pedro en Côte d'Ivoire et Takoradi au Ghana. Voilà, des ports qui sont en pleine et qui ont besoin de les accompagner dans le renfort et la.
Thank you. Merci. Okay, thank you so much. And next, we're going to also be talking about, so a lot of times we've seen West Africa. I'm currently with the DJ NIMASA, Dr. Dako Kopete. I'd like to first of all congratulate you on the successful hosting of this program.
Thank you very much.
Could you appraise the event? Because this is the first time in over 4 years Nigeria is able to host something like this.
Well, thus far, we have considered it very successful. We have delegations from over 75 countries, with United States having the highest delegation of 22 persons, followed by the UK with a delegation of 20 persons. And you have delegations from small island states. 40 sections at the various thematic sections have been most impressive, and they've come up reaching recommendations which will be approved by plenary. Thus far, I think.
At the end of the day, what would you say is your expectation for this conference as a host?
Our expectation is that this conference will come up with definite roadmap on how to tackle maritime insecurity in the Gulf of Guinea and make our waterways safe and secure so that global commerce can flourish.
All right. Thank you so much. We know we have to run for a lot of activities. So
thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, thank you so much. Still reporting live from the International Conference Center in Abuja at the Maritime Global Security Summit, which is taking place at the International Conference Center. So
of a comprehensive maritime strategy. 2. Collaborate with the Navy to build capacity for the effective discharge of all relevant security, intelligence, and law enforcement under the Act or any other law on maritime offences in Nigeria. And 3. Do any other act as may be necessary for the implementation of the Act, working in collaboration with the Nigerian Navy and other critical stakeholders. 14. Responsibility to gather intelligence, patrol waters, and investigate offences. The Act imposes a responsibility on law enforcement and security agencies to gather intelligence, patrol the waters, and investigate offences provided for under the Act. 15. Powers of law enforcement agencies. The Act bestows broad powers on law enforcement agencies under Section 17. These powers include 1. Enforcement of provisions of the Act. 2. Adopt any measure to prevent or combat maritime crimes within Nigeria's territory. 3. Facilitate the detention and investigation of maritime offences and other unlawful acts. 4. Establish, maintain, and secure domestic, regional, and international communication to facilitate the rapid exchange of information concerning maritime crime. 5. Conduct research with the aim of improving preventive measures to effectively and efficiently combat maritime offences and other unlawful acts. And 6. Partner with any other maritime stakeholders, West African neighbors, and other Nigerian maritime stakeholders to provide the necessary education, support, information, awareness and sensitization towards the prevention and elimination of maritime offences and other unlawful acts. 16. Training programs for enforcement officers. Law enforcement agencies may initiate, develop, or improve on specific training programs for their officers charged with the responsibility for the prevention, detention, investigation, elimination, and prosecution of maritime crimes in Nigeria. 17. Power of NIMASA to enter agreement and arrangement on the Act. Section 18 of the Act empowers Nigeria through NIMASA to enter into cooperation agreement or arrangement with any national or international bodies or other intelligence, law enforcement, and security agencies or organizations to facilitate the discharge of its functions under the Act. 18. Establishment of the Piracy and Maritime Offences Fund. Under the supervision of the Minister of Transportation, NIMASA has an obligation to establish and maintain the Piracy and Maritime Offences Fund, PMO Fund, which is to be utilized for the implementation of the Act. 19. Financing the PMO Fund. The Act provides that the PMO Fund shall be financed from the listed sources. 1. Such money as may in each year be approved by the federal government for the implementation of the Act. 2. Gifts, financial contributions by beneficiaries of the services of the Maritime Law Enforcement Agency's duties under the Act. 3. 35% of the proceeds of the sales of any property seized or anything forfeited under the Act, including instruments used in the commission of crime and criminal activities. And 4. Contributions from the Maritime Fund under the NIMASA Act. 20. Power to make regulations and guidelines. Section 20 of the Act empowers the Minister to make or cause to be made by NIMASA regulations or guidelines for the implementation of any provisions of the Act. Any regulation or guidelines made will only take effect when published in the Federal Government's Gazette. Subject to successive renewals of 90 days until the conclusion of the investigation and detention is dispensed with. 8. NIMASA can prosecute offenders. The Act vests the power of prosecution of offences on the Honorable Attorney General of the Federation, any officer so designated from the Attorney General of the Federation's office, and on the agency defined in the Act with his consent. 9. Duty to notify. Where an offender has been taken into custody within Nigeria's jurisdiction, the Act imposes a duty on NIMASA to notify any state party to the SUA Convention that has established jurisdiction over the alleged offender in custody in accordance with laid down provision under the Act, or has an interest in him on circumstances warranting his detention. NIMASA is to also promptly give a report of its preliminary findings or inquiry as to whether jurisdiction is intended to be exercised or not. 10. It prescribes punishment of life imprisonment, enormous monetary fines, and restitution forfeiture for offences. By virtue of provision of Section 12 of the Act, a person who commits an act of piracy, armed robbery at sea, or any other unlawful act under the Act is liable on conviction to life imprisonment and a fine of not more than 50 million naira. in addition to the restitution to the owner or the forfeiture to the federal government of Nigeria, whatever the person has obtained or gained from the commission of the crime. Maritime offences other than piracy as well as grievous bodily harm to another during the commission of an offence attracts a 15-year imprisonment in addition to restitution and forfeiture. Causing the death of any person attracts life imprisonment without the possibility of parole in addition to restitution and forfeiture. Piracy offences by body corporates attracts at least 500 million naira fine, 100 million naira from persons responsible for control of the company in addition to 15 years imprisonment, restitution and forfeiture. Other maritime offences by body corporate attract at least 350 million naira fine, 100 million naira fine from persons responsible for control of the company in addition to 12 years imprisonment, restitution and forfeiture. Other categories of punishment are also prescribed for persons who aid and abet, threaten to commit an offence, become an accessory after the act, willfully destroy evidence and cause obstruction in the enforcement of the power under the act. 11. Duty of listed persons, entities to report incidents. The Act imposes a duty on certain listed persons or entities to report in the form prescribed by NIMASA any incidents which may constitute an offence under the Act to the relevant authorities after having knowledge of the incident, and the relevant authority shall send the reports to NIMASA. 12. Duty of NIMASA to report to the IMO. NIMASA is obliged under Section 16, subsection 4 of the Act to send a report of the circumstances concerning each incident or offence, the action and the measures taken in relation to the offender or alleged offender, and the result of any extrajudicial proceedings, other legal proceedings, or prosecution of the offender or alleged offender without delay and in the required formats to the Secretary General of the International Maritime Organization, IMO. 13. NIMASA Coordinating Body. NIMASA is named as the coordinating body under the supervision of the Minister for all maritime activities under the Act and has the responsibility to 1. Ensure the effective formulation and implementation of a comprehensive maritime strategy. 2. Collaborate with the Navy to build capacity for the effective discharge of all relevant security, intelligence, and law enforcement under the Act or any other law on maritime offences in Nigeria. And 3. Do any other act as may be necessary for the implementation of the Act, working in collaboration with the Nigerian Navy and other critical stakeholders. 14. Responsibility to gather intelligence, patrol waters, and investigate offences. The Act imposes a responsibility on law enforcement and security agencies to gather intelligence, patrol the waters, and investigate offences provided for under the Act. 15. Powers of law enforcement agencies. The Act bestows broad powers on law enforcement agencies under Section 17. These powers include 1. Enforcement of provisions of the Act. 2. Adopt any measure to prevent or combat maritime crimes within Nigeria's territory. 3. Facilitate the detention and investigation of maritime offences and other unlawful acts. 4. Establish, maintain, and secure domestic, regional, and international communication to facilitate the rapid exchange of information concerning maritime crime. 5. Conduct research with the aim of improving preventive measures to effectively and efficiently combat maritime offences and other unlawful acts. And 6. Partner with any other maritime stakeholders, West African neighbors, and other Nigerian maritime stakeholders to provide the necessary education, support, information, awareness, and sensitization towards the prevention and elimination of maritime offences and other unlawful acts. 16. Training programs for enforcement officers. Law enforcement agencies may initiate, develop, or improve on specific training programs for their officers charged with the responsibility for the prevention, detention, investigation, elimination, and prosecution of maritime crimes in Nigeria. 17. Power of NIMASA to enter agreement and arrangement on the Act. Section 18 of the Act empowers Nigeria through NIMASA to enter into cooperation agreement or arrangement with any national or international bodies or other intelligence, law enforcement, and security agencies or organizations to facilitate the discharge of its functions under the Act. 18. Establishment of the Piracy and Maritime Offences Fund. Under the supervision of the Minister of Transportation, NIMASA has an obligation to establish and maintain the Piracy and Maritime Offences Fund (PMO) fund, which is to be utilized for the implementation of the Act. 19. Financing the PMO fund. The Act provides that the PMO fund shall be financed from the underlisted sources. 1. Such money as may in each year be approved by the federal government for the implementation of the Act. 2. Gifts, financial contributions by beneficiaries of the services of the Maritime Law Enforcement Agency's duties under the Act. 3. 35% of the proceeds of the sales of any property seized or anything forfeited under the Act, including instruments used in the commission of crime and criminal activities. And 4. Contributions from the Maritime Fund under the NIMASA Act. 20. Power to make regulations and guidelines. Section 20 of the Act empowers the Minister to make or cause to be made by NIMASA regulations or guidelines for the implementation of any provisions of the Act. Any regulation or guidelines made would only take effect when published in the Federal Government's Gazette.
kilometers confirm my this app is not ringing, is it? Okay. Okay. Okay.
It's time to run for tea break and return to our different sessions for our next thematic discussion. We have 3 sessions currently, and in your brochure, the names of the halls on page 5 of your brochure. 34 and 35. Deployment in maritime security to our right, to the foyer. Panel 8, trends, sectors, and capability requirements. Who right enhancing hold at the hall. Yes, I've said that. 3 sessions are holding concurrently. One in the Aso Hall, which is session 9, panel 9, enhancing maritime domain awareness. Right here in the Africa Hall, we have future of maritime security. And panel 7 holds at the Executive Hall, that is technology deployment in maritime security. Ushers, please help us move people. Please help us move people to the various halls. On pages 34 and 35, you will see the designated hall per panel session. So if you're in doubt or you're uncertain or unclear, please flip to page 34 and page 35. One more time, I reiterate, panel 7, which is technology deployment in maritime security, holds at the Executive Hall, which is outside to the foyer to our right. Panel 8, future of maritime security, holds right here in the Africa Hall. If you're for this session, please move closer. Let's be sure that everyone here is with us. Please move closer. We have seats, vacant seats. Just make sure you occupy seats in front of you. Thank you. Thank you. People are moving. Thank you very much. We're grateful. And then panel 9 holds in the Aso Hall. and that is Enhancing Maritime Domain Awareness, which is out to our left to the Aso Hall. We need to see some calmness before we welcome the panel moderator up here. All our distinguished guests, we welcome you. Thank you so much for being here with us. All delegates, conferees, speakers, panelists here, thank you. In a moment, we will welcome the moderator up. We're just waiting for the hall to settle a little bit more. Thank you so much. There's a lot of movement going on, thank you. People are dispersing. 3 sessions are holding concurrently, thank you. Our panel moderator for this session, Future of Maritime Security, Trends, Emerging Threat Vectors, and Capability Requirements, is Rear Admiral Akpan. May we please welcome him up. I was expecting to see you in your uniform that time. Which time?
Your Excellencies, representative of the special guest of honor, honorable ministers, members of National Assembly, senior military officers, distinguished invited guests, ladies and gentlemen. I am Rear Admiral Francis Dan Akpan, retired. Whilst in the service, I was the Provost Marshal Navy. I'm a specialist aviator, pioneer of the Nigerian Navy Air Arm. I was flag to the Chief of General Staff. I was Flag Officer Commanding Western Naval Command. I was Flag Officer Commanding Naval Training Command, back to back. I was also at one time Defense Advisor to South Africa, indeed Pioneer Defense Advisor, with concurrent accreditation to Madagascar, Botswana, Namibia, the kingdoms of Lesotho and Swaziland. Whilst in service, I was the Armed Forces representative to the Gulf of Guinea Energy Security Summit. I'm currently involved in maritime consultancy. I'm a member of the Technical Committee on the actualization and realization of the Ibom Deep Sea Port and the Ibom Industrial City. I'm also a director with a maritime logistics company, Tamus Ventures. I'm also consultant to the firm handling and establishing maritime dual capabilities for the Nigerian Navy called the Falcon Eye Project. Our topic, Future of Maritime Security, Trends, Threats, Vectors, and Capability Requirements. We are lucky and privileged to have established maritime security experts in their own right, and so it's my pleasure to invite them to the podium. Let me start with the panelist discussants. Mr. Dirk Sibels, Senior Analyst at Risk Intelligence, Denmark. Please put your hands together for him. Mr. Jelis Shalakon, Security Expert within the Corporate Security Division, Total Group. My good and new friend, Harry Pierce, Intelligence Manager, Ambre. Lieutenant Colonel Ake Kaudio Josie Nicole, and finally, but not the least by no means, Dasika Ursula, Associate Professor of Political Science, University of Amsterdam. You are welcomed. It is my pleasure to invite to the podium the lead speaker, Professor Timothy Edmonds, Professor of International Security and Director of Global Insecurity Center at the University of Bristol. Please put your hands together for Tim Edmonds.
Good morning, everybody. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, first of all, to our moderator for the kind introduction. Thank you, too, to the organisers for putting on such an excellent and important conference and for inviting me to speak here today. I'm very pleased and honoured to be here. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Tim Edmonds. I'm Professor of International Security at the University of Bristol in the UK. I'm also co-director of the Safe Seas network of academic institutions, which I co-direct with Christian Buger from the University of Copenhagen, who spoke yesterday. And if you'd like to find out more about the work of Safe Seas, you can do so on our website at www.safeseas.net. So my plan for this session is to give a few introductory observations on the nature of the maritime security challenge today, in order that we can think about what that might mean for the future of that challenge, before turning to some of the questions that were set out by the organisers in the guidance notes for speakers for this panel. Now, there were quite a lot of questions, but I think broadly they fell into three main categories. First, are there lessons that helps to frame how we should think about how best to tackle the kinds of challenges we face in this region today. The first point to make here, and this is something that's been said several times at the conference, is that maritime security is a complex and multifaceted phenomena. It comprises a range of different issue areas, from piracy and armed robbery at sea, to illegal fishing and fisheries crimes, to the trafficking of narcotics, arms, people, and many other things. And for that reason, it incorporates a number of different dimensions of security. Maritime security issues can impact on national security in various ways, for example, by threatening vital national interests, such as the ability to trade by sea. By extension, it has economic security implications. Not only is 90% of global trade conducted by sea, but whole coastal economies are dependent on activities like fishing, tourism, maritime resource extraction, and so on. Insecurities at sea threaten all of those things. Maritime security has important environmental security elements. Overfishing damages marine biodiversity, sometimes catastrophically. Pollution at sea, bunkering, or careless natural resource extraction can have similarly pathological environmental effects. And finally, this was a point made in the plenary this morning, maritime security has human security implications. Declining fish stocks threaten food security in coastal regions and the livelihoods of coastal communities. Piracy threatens seafarers with violence or kidnapping, while human trafficking threatens those people who are its victims. Now, these different dimensions mean that both that maritime security is an issue of pressing importance for coastal states and for the global economy and for the environment, but they also mean it's a complex challenge to solve. Maritime security challenges are, by their very nature, often interconnected. Rampant illegal fishing may damage fish stocks and coastal livelihoods, leading destitute fishers to look for other sources of income, perhaps piracy, trafficking, or illegal fishing themselves. Maritime insecurities are transnational in that, by their very nature, they are mobile and cross national borders. Maritime crimes may be planned in one country, take place in another, have their profits laundered and their proceeds spent yet somewhere else. Maritime insecurities are not just problems of the sea. They often have root causes on land or require organisational and planning infrastructures that are necessarily land-based, and that's a point I'll come back to later on. And finally, maritime insecurities cross different jurisdictions. Because they're transnational, they cross the sovereign territories of states, but they also implicate different jurisdictions of different organisations and agencies, navies, coast guards, legal systems, prisons, ports, as well as private actors like oil or shipping companies. It's a complex institutional and organisational picture. Now, these dimensions and characteristics present significant challenges to maritime security and law enforcement actors. However, they also suggest that getting maritime security right can have significant positive effects too. A secure maritime environment offers opportunities for blue growth and sustainable economic development for coastal communities and beyond. So how to get maritime security right? And I'm going to start by focusing on the first of the organisers' questions about the role of international actors and whether there are lessons that can be learned from other experiences in other parts of the world. And I think the first point to make here is that context matters. Some of the challenges, some of the challenges are similar. Maritime security in the Gulf of Guinea has distinct characteristics from the nature of the problem, and the nature of the problem is somewhat different from other parts of the world. So just to briefly illustrate this, I've put together a short table. Could we have the table? Yeah. Detailing some of the differences between piracy or sea robbery activities in this region and those off the coast of Somalia, which is often seen as a role model for international counter-piracy activities in other parts of the world. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these for time reasons, but I will just pick out a few that I think are important for how we understand the problem. The first is that in the Western Indian Ocean, almost all attacks took place on the high seas. Here, a significant number of attacks take place in the waters of regional states. So what we're looking at often is sea robbery as much as piracy. The primary activities are somewhat more complex here as well. Off the coast of Somalia, the model for piracy was built almost wholly around kidnap and ransom. Here we have kidnap and ransom, but we also have ship and cargo seizure, oil bunkering, robbery from crews, and theft from ships and so on. Now that's important because those different business models require different kinds of facilitating infrastructures. In the Western Indian Ocean, the facilitating infrastructure was locally specific. It required safe anchorages for hijacked ships, accommodating but again highly localized power structures, and the profits were spent locally. Here, piracy is sophisticated and integrated into local infrastructure and markets. It requires access to markets for stolen goods, access to port facilities for processing, storage and resale, and access to money laundering facilities to process the profits. So what we see here then is that one key maritime security challenge, in this case piracy, can have really quite different characteristics depending on the geographic region in which it takes place. Now that means that we need to be careful about directly applying lessons from one region to the other without a proper appreciation of what the problems and political context of any given region are. So in that context, importing the model of international counter-piracy and naval interventions from the Horn of Africa to the Gulf of Guinea is neither straightforward nor likely. Countering piracy with international forces in this region would raise much trickier questions of sovereignty and jurisdiction than was the case in the Western Indian Ocean, in part because so many attacks take place in regional countries' home waters. And I sense no appetite for that here, quite the reverse in fact. Similarly, in the Western Indian Ocean, piracy presented a threat to one of the key arteries of global trade. Here, the effects of piracy and sea robbery are regionally contained and focused on the oil economy. Could we have the next slide, please? In this sense, they are regional challenges more than they are globalized ones, or as much as they are globalized ones. And the solutions to them are likely to be regionalized too. This is an area where African states could and should be leading. And in that context, perhaps the most effective and realistic role for international forces in this region is one of facilitation and assistance rather than direct action. It's in helping states to develop their own maritime security capabilities, as well as supporting infrastructure and activities like court systems, maritime domain awareness, and information sharing mechanisms and so on, so they're better placed to tackle these problems on their own terms with their own capabilities over the long term. The other key role for internationals, and I think this is something that perhaps doesn't get said enough, is to reflect on how they can help out with some of these problems at home. The demand for fish, for example, the demand that drives industrial-scale illegal fishing in the first place, comes from outside, from Europe, from Asia, and elsewhere. We know that much of the illegal fishing that takes place in this region is carried out by large industrial trawlers that are owned or operated by foreign companies. And working to crack down and regulate these vessels and develop robust standards for the sustainable consumption and sale of fish in home markets would be an important step to addressing both illegal fishing, but also some of the causes, the underlying causes of maritime insecurities in this region. The organisers also asked about the role of armed private security guards on merchant vessels. Now, I'm not going to say very much about this because the other panellists are much better qualified to do so than I am. Could I have the next slide, please? But what I would say is that, again, I think the differing circumstances of the Gulf of Guinea mean we need to tread a little bit carefully here. The higher levels of violence used by sea robbers in this region increases perhaps the risk of armed clashes and firefights, which regional states in turn would have to adjudicate on and police. It creates other kinds of problems. There's also the question of how such personnel are to be regulated and policed, and what should happen should any go rogue or choose to engage in piracy themselves. In essence, I think we perhaps need to be careful, unless we're regulating it very carefully, about bringing yet more private guns into an already complex and violent situation. That might cause more problems than it solves. So, while armed security guards on ships may offer a kind of solution under specific, regulated and perhaps constrained circumstances, perhaps, for example, working with state authorities in partnership, they're not a magic bullet to the piracy problem, and their use should be treated with caution. That brings me to the final set of questions on what actions should be taken to strengthen maritime security in this part of the world. Now, clearly, as I've already noted, part of the answer here is in developing regional countries' own maritime security capacities. Enforcement at sea is important and can make a difference. But it's only part of a long-term fix rather than a long-term fix in and of itself. And in my final comments, I've tried to think about how we might think about solving or addressing maritime security in this region over the long term. The first point to make here is that maritime insecurities in this region, could we have the next slide, please? Maritime insecurities in this region are not likely to disappear anytime soon. The price of oil means that the profits of piracy are likely to outweigh its risks for some time to come. The entry requirements for many maritime crimes are low. They require some seamanship skills, access to a boat, and maybe a gun and some light weapons. But the rewards can be very high, particularly in communities where unemployment and poverty are high, or where legitimate marine activities like fishing have become less profitable. In that context, and as experience from other regions shows, more effective maritime security in one area may make that place more secure, a particular port, for example, but but the risk is that it simply displaces the problem elsewhere to somewhere where law enforcement at sea is weaker. It also does little to address the root causes of these insecurities in the first place, which are often to be found in issues of economic exclusion and deprivation on land. A second point that follows on from this is that maritime security is about more than just piracy. In this region, we also see major challenges of illegal fishing, as well as trafficking activities of various sorts. And the important point to make here, as I mentioned earlier, is that these crimes are interconnected. Rapacious illegal fishing by industrial trawlers damages the catches and profits of artisanal fishers and damages coastal livelihoods as fish stocks decline. If the coastal economies decline, then so too do legitimate opportunities to make a decent living, which in turn increases the potential recruitment pool for piracy and other maritime crimes. In contrast, working to develop sustainable maritime economies by tackling illegal fishers, developing sustainable coastal livelihoods through the blue economy and so on, offers a way out of this vicious circle and new opportunities for growth. In this sense, getting illegal fishing right may also help with getting piracy right too. In essence, these are challenges of both security and development. Third, it's important to ask what kind of problem we're dealing with before formulating a response. Maritime security is a multifaceted challenge involving issues of security, development, and law enforcement. And there's a danger, I think, that focusing too much on traditional security, that is, on navy or military responses, means that we simply end up managing the consequences of the problem rather than addressing the problem itself. Now, part of the answer is here, as I've just suggested, about approaching the issue from its deeper root causes in issues of governance and political economy on land. But I think it also means approaching such challenges as organised criminal enterprises as much as security threats per se. I've already mentioned that the entry barriers for maritime crime are low. They require people, boats and guns, at least for the criminal foot soldiers on the ground. You can arrest and incarcerate these people, but while the profits are there will likely be more that pop up to take their place, or they'll simply go elsewhere in the region where security is less strong. But if we step back from the foot soldiers of the crimes, we can see that, as with all organised crimes, such activities require significant orchestrating and facilitating capacities too. Now, that's particularly the case in this region, given the relatively sophisticated business model that pirates employ. For this to work, they need funding and finance. They need intelligence, infrastructure, and contacts to process stolen cargoes, launder money, and so on. In short, they require organisation. Now, that's important because it can point us towards the underlying organisational structures, supply chains, and profit logics of threats such as piracy, and help us develop responses that can target the often land-based enabling structures that lie behind the actual manifestation of these threats at sea. So in that sense, approaching maritime security in this region as first and foremost a problem of land-based organised crime, and focusing responses on the organisational structures that support these activities through the criminal supply chain, may offer a more effective and longer-term solution than policing problems at sea. In essence, it's important to target the risk-reward calculations of the kingpins behind the crimes, as well as the foot soldiers who actually carry them out. And finally, this is my last point, that tells us something about where we should focus capacity building. It might mean, for example, looking at building infrastructures and capacities to support legitimate livelihoods in coastal communities. It may mean developing legal infrastructures to enable the proper prosecution of perpetrators, and Nigeria's new law on the suppression of piracy and other maritime offences is an important step here. Or the development of stronger investigative and intelligence capacities for the suppression of organised crimes on land and organised criminal networks. But it also means learning how to manage donors effectively. Not all offers of assistance will be helpful, and some may duplicate or contradict others. It's important that regional states have a clear sense of their own problems and priorities in this area, and as far as possible, sit in the driving seat of international assistance programs. Now, none of these responses offer magic bullet solutions on their own, and none of them offer a quick fix. But maritime security is a multifaceted and complex challenge, and thus requires multifaceted and complex responses too. And it is in addressing these deeper structural challenges that longer-term solutions to the challenges of maritime security in this region are likely to be found. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. With a very difficult topic as our topic of the day, Professor Tim Edmonds, thank you for doing justice to the paper. I'm going to leave you for now, but be prepared to come back to answer some questions from our very, very distinguished audience. Good. Future of maritime security trends, emerging vectors, and capability requirements. Let me add, Tim, to your paper, apart from the list of the prevailing maritime threats, the issue that must bog our minds as maritime stakeholders. Focus has really been on land, like Tim said, and the threats, of course, linked to sea. But let me remind us that the issue and essence of maritime cybersecurity and space security. With the sophisticated web systems that we are deploying all around the Gulf of Guinea, maritime domain awareness equipment, cyberspace security must attract us, and we must begin to put in place strategies to counter them when they take place. Any attacks on your MD equipment, any attacks on your surveillance equipment, any attacks on the navigation equipment and communication equipment could be disastrous and catastrophic. Also, cyber security and space security could affect, for the Navy, our digitally wired weapon system. The other aspect that I think we must take seriously, which came up yesterday during the blue segment on the blue economy, is the aspect of climate change and its effects on the coastal demographics, especially the areas of the Gulf of Guinea. But of course, yesterday we learned that climate change and rising sea tides has affected West African states like Togo and of course the Republic of Benin. So we must watch out for these two prevailing, and for the future we must take cognizance of the maritime cybersecurity, space security, issue and essence of climate change, rising sea levels, and of course the dangers of pollution. On this note, like my friends in the Navy will say, let me not take the wind out of the sails of the panel discussants. It's my pleasure to invite Deck Sabels. I have 4 gentlemen and 2 ladies. Because I'm very gender sensitive, I shall call Deck. Later I shall invite Lieutenant Colonel Ake, and then of course Harry and Ursula in that order. Please put your hands together as I ask Deck Sabels. The panel discussants will use the rostrum so that they can really get the attraction and get the concentration of the audience. Deck, please come.
Well, thank you very much, Admiral, for the introduction. In the context of this conference, we have heard a lot about African solutions to African problems, and we've heard about that a lot in the past. I feel like as a middle-aged white man, I'm not perfectly qualified to provide African solutions to African problems. I would like to talk about my day-to-day work and would like to focus on one topic in particular, which is unfortunately rarely addressed in detail, and it's also, judging from the comments of representatives from the shipping industry today, not necessarily popular with everybody in the room. Namely, the links between piracy and other types of illegal activities at sea in the Gulf of Guinea. Now, reporting of incidents has increased in recent years, There are different reasons for that, but the main point is that the Yaoundé structure is actually working, even though all participating countries suffer from a lack of resources. Unfortunately, that has also led to an increase in reports about incidents that are not typical piracy cases. And I will go through just 3 examples, and all of them were recorded this year. In April, the product tanker Apicus was attacked. The product tanker Apicus was attacked while at anchor off Bonny Island in the Niger Delta. 7 crew members were kidnapped from that vessel, but why was a small ship anchored in an area which is known to be particularly dangerous? In fact, Nigerian media later reported that authorities were actually investigating the ship for possible involvement in fuel smuggling, partly because the AIS was repeatedly switched off in the months before the attack, possibly so that the vessel could not be tracked. Now, that would certainly explain the ship's presence close to Bonny Island, and in reality, it may have been a dispute between different criminal groups rather than a genuine piracy attack. Sorry for that. In May, the reported attack against the Didona 1 off Lomé in Togo made a lot of headlines. The ship was allegedly hijacked, but it was later rescued by the Togolese Navy. 6 Nigerians and 2 Togolese suspects were then arrested, but that was not the end of the story. The owner of the ship was also arrested, and it's very likely that this incident, again, was related to fuel smuggling. And it was probably not a genuine hijacking, similar to attacks that we've seen in this part of the Gulf of Guinea in the past. And then finally, just last month, an attack against a fishing vessel, the Saint-Nicolas, was reported off the Bakassi Peninsula of Cameroon. 2 crew members were kidnapped from that ship, and crew belongings were taken. But the perpetrators were apparently looking for the chief engineer, who conveniently had disembarked just 1 day earlier. In an area where many fishing vessels are known to be smuggling fuel from Nigeria to Cameroon, and even more so probably after a big fire at the Limbe refinery in June, this certainly sounds suspicious. And in short, it is very unlikely that this was a genuine attack with the aim to kidnap crew members, rather than, again, a dispute between different criminal groups. Now, these and similar incidents, many more of them have been reported in just this year, but also last year. These incidents have to be analyzed very carefully. They are unlikely to pose a threat for merchant vessels that are doing legitimate operations in the Gulf of Guinea. At the same time, they are a concern for domestic law enforcement agencies and for navies. Various threats to maritime security, and you can see them here, and these are all outlined in the Yaoundé Code of Conduct that we've heard so much about. All of these threats are unlikely to be addressed in just a few years. This is a situation that has developed over decades, but more transparency is needed, and all partners involved in the Yaoundé process must work extremely hard to provide that transparency. For operators of merchant ships, it is important to know whether their vessels may become victims of a pirate attack, or whether attacks in a specific area are only targeting small and locally trading vessels. For security agencies in West and Central Africa, it is also vital to know that the threats, which threats they actually have to address. Combating piracy is very different from actions against fuel smuggling or solving disputes between local fishermen and foreign trawlers. And finally, international involvement can be helpful if it is genuine, but unfortunately that often focuses largely on piracy. It is somewhat highlighted by a center like MDAT, which may have some credibility in the shipping industry as a military institution, but it is based outside the region, and reports issued there do not reflect maritime security in the Gulf of Guinea because they fail to highlight links between different types of illegal activities at sea. The same is true for multinational exercises. They can be effective if they are based on requirements of countries in this region. but expectations are not often aligned. In the case of France, for example, naval exercises are also a way to maintain political influence, especially in Francophone countries, but the same is true for other Western countries. But it's also the case for new partners like India or particularly China. So what can actually be done to improve the situation, and what has to be done in the future? There must be a coordinated effort, and different actors need to overcome their reservations. The maritime industry has to improve transparency and cooperation with law enforcement agencies here in West and Central Africa. That includes ship operators, but also charterers, insurance companies, and even oil majors that are engaged in offshore operations. The ICC representatives from Yaoundé have made a very good suggestion, and I'm looking forward to that discussion later this afternoon, and this is certainly a very good step in the right direction. As for regional countries, they must also increase transparency of rules and regulations to assist the shipping industry in conducting legal operations. For example, some ships have been detained in recent months, yet these were merely engaged in legal activities without the proper authorization, but they have been detained for allegedly illegal ship-to-ship transfers at sea. The shipping companies only realized that they required an actual authorization when their ships had already been detained, and this is a situation that could have been easily avoided. Regional countries also have to address shortcomings and problems with maritime security. I realize that it is not only a little embarrassing to actually admit, for a government to admit, that security agencies are not equipped to fight against fuel smuggling, against illegal fishing, against piracy and other maritime security challenges. Nevertheless, this is a necessary first step towards addressing these problems in the future. And then the final recommendation goes to international partners. They have to learn to listen to these particular concerns and then provide specific and targeted assistance within multinational programs or exercises. Any assistance will otherwise not be sustainable, and that will certainly lead to frustration on both sides. The efforts of all partners involved in the Yaoundé process in general, and in this conference in particular, show that maritime security in this beautiful part of the world is being addressed, but progress is not always fast. I would nevertheless like to end on a quote which I also used in my recently published book, which I think is a very good way to describe the situation. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dick. The best time to plant a tree is now. Dick tried to link up piracy and other maritime security issues at sea. And of course, there was a good attempt there at trying to work out modalities for immediate, mid and long-term plan. 5 minutes and try and keep to time. Please put your hands together as I welcome Harry Pierce.
Yeah, great. Well, good morning, and thank you very much for your hospitality during this conference. Very grateful for that. Today, I'd like to, as is the mandate, address.
Yesterday, the Chief of Trading Operations spoke about declining statistics of piracy attacks and sea robbery. He tried as much as possible to explain that most of the time, when we have sea robbery incidents, they are reported as piracy attacks. I hope that is still around so that towards the discussion period, we'll be able to have some very clear statements as to the rate, the rail of the incidents of piracy and sea robbery at sea. It's my pleasure to invite Lieutenant Colonel Ake Nicole to come to the podium. She will speak in French and we will be very generous to just add 2 minutes to allow for proper interpretation. Please put your hands together for her.
Good morning. I will make my presentation in French. My English is so poor that I have to protect your ear. But make an effort to follow me. I have a PowerPoint and try to follow me. That is all my English for today. Thank you. Alors, merci à tous. Il nous est demandé aujourd'hui donc de parler des menaces émergentes. Je vais aller directement donc aux menaces que je considère comme étant des menaces émergentes dans le golfe de Guinée. Mes prédécesseurs ont parlé d'un certain nombre de crimes, notamment de la piraterie, des vols à main armée. Moi, je voudrais plutôt insister sur la piraterie moderne, que je qualifie de moderne en raison donc de son impact qu'elle a. C'est vraiment le crime le plus médiatisé, c'est celui auquel beaucoup de personnes pensent en premier lorsque nous parlons de criminalité maritime, en raison du fait que cette piraterie a mué avec le temps. Elle est devenue beaucoup plus violente, elle utilise des moyens beaucoup plus audacieux, et aujourd'hui, cette piraterie s'agrège d'un certain nombre de nouveaux phénomènes dont nous allons parler. Le premier phénomène sur lequel je voudrais m'attarder est celui qui est lié au terrorisme. Le terrorisme, aujourd'hui, pour moi, est vraiment une menace à laquelle doivent se préparer donc tous les États du Golfe de Guinée. Le terrorisme s'agrège également avec la notion donc de prise d'otage. Lorsque les personnes attaquent les navires aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas uniquement...
Sorry, I think you just pause for about a minute to allow the ushers to distribute the headsets. Just a minute.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
So channel 1 on your headphones is for English. Channel 1 is for English. Channel 2 is French, channel 3 is Portuguese, and channel 4 is Spanish. So channel 1 will be for English.
Bien, merci. Désolé pour ces désagréments. J'avais déjà prévenu, mais bon. Alors, donc, je reprends sur les menaces donc, considérées pour moi comme émergentes. Donc, la piraterie, dont nous avons longuement déjà parlé au cours de cette session. Next. Et les menaces qui, pour moi, aujourd'hui, sont des menaces émergentes parce que nouvelles. Donc, ce serait donc le terrorisme, la prise d'otages, notamment dans le but d'obtenir des rançons. Il ne s'agit plus aujourd'hui de capter donc la marchandise, mais de prendre des personnes en otage, notamment des étrangers, pour pouvoir obtenir une certaine somme d'argent. Donc aujourd'hui, les pirates allient donc leur crime au crime donc de prise d'otage pour pouvoir avoir de l'argent. Il y a également le trafic d'armes qui génère des flux financiers extrêmement importants et qui alimentent les conflits dans nos États. Une nouvelle forme de criminalité à laquelle nous devons donc nous préparer ici dans le Golfe de Guinée, c'est également la cybercriminalité. La cybercriminalité est un phénomène aujourd'hui que nous ne connaissons pas beaucoup dans le Golfe de Guinée, mais qui pourrait effectivement nous toucher dans très peu de temps. Alors nous avons à nous préparer pour faire face également à cette criminalité. Alors ces différents crimes dont nous venons de parler, le terrorisme, la prise d'otages, la piraterie, la cybercriminalité, sont des crimes qui sont extrêmement médiatisés. C'est ceux-là qui sont sous le feu des projecteurs, on ne parle que de ça. Mais à côté de ces crimes, il y a des crimes qui sont beaucoup plus silencieux, qui sont des crimes pour moi à caractère écologique. Nous avons les crimes liés donc au trafic des espèces animales dans nos États. Les éléphants, les rhinocéros, vous voyez, sont donc massacrés pour pouvoir prélever certains organes qui auraient donc des vertus aphrodisiaques. Donc ces espèces-là sont extrêmement recherchées. Il en est de même pour un petit animal qu'on appelle le pangolin, je ne sais pas quelle est sa traduction en anglais, mais dont les écailles ont également des vertus thérapeutiques. Et lorsqu'il y a des saisies, on se rend compte que la somme que pourraient procurer donc ces écailles-là aux criminels est extrêmement importante. Ces différentes menaces alimentent donc la piraterie parce qu'elles produisent des sources financières extrêmement importantes qui donc vont conduire à mettre en exergue les crimes de piraterie. Il y a également une menace sanitaire qui est liée au trafic de faux médicaments. Alors nos populations sont extrêmement en danger parce qu'il y a énormément de faux médicaments qui sont vendus sur nos marchés et donc qui constituent des menaces de santé publique. Que faire face à ces différentes formes de criminalité? Next, please. Alors, quelle réponse? Il y a plusieurs pistes de réflexion qui ont été abordées. La première réponse, next, se situe au plan juridique. Alors, nous avons en Afrique, notamment dans le Golfe de Guinée, un certain nombre donc, de stratégies, un certain nombre de déclarations qui ont été faites par nos chefs d'État et donc qui encouragent les différents États à prendre des mesures en vue de lutter efficacement contre toutes les formes de criminalité maritime. Les textes existent. Le souci, c'est souvent l'implémentation, surtout pour les textes internationaux. Dans nos États, comment implémenter ces textes et comment les mettre en œuvre? Voilà le défi qui nous est posé. Next, please. Sur le plan organisationnel et opérationnel, nous avons donc des structures de coordination qui ont été mises en place, et cela à tous les niveaux. Au plan national, nous avons donc des structures de coordination. Je pourrais vous citer l'exemple de mon pays, donc la Côte d'Ivoire, où nous avons ce que nous appelons le secrétariat de l'action de l'État en mer, qui est une structure fédératrice, une structure donc de coordination des activités des administrations qui existent en mer, et dont l'un des buts est également de pouvoir lutter contre la criminalité maritime en permettant aux différents acteurs de travailler ensemble. Cette structure est placée à un haut niveau, donc pour permettre justement à tous les acteurs d'avoir une voix politique très importante qui puisse donc donner les directions qu'il faut pour lutter contre les différents crimes maritimes. Next. Alors, sur cette diapo, je vous montre un exemple donc d'exercice qui a été fait dans nos eaux. C'était une opération réelle que nous avons dénommée Junction Rain, qui a été faite avec la participation, avec l'appui donc des États-Unis d'Amérique et qui a permis à environ 5 administrations qui ont des compétences en mer de travailler ensemble dans une opération de lutte contre la pêche illégale. Cette activité a permis de comprendre que si nous sommes réellement en mer, nous pouvons lutter contre la criminalité maritime. Nous avons raisonné environ une vingtaine de navires qui étaient en situation illégale, de pêche illégale, pardon. Nous les avons saisis, nous leur avons donné des amendes et cela devait procurer environ 90 à 100 millions de francs CFA. Donc c'est vraiment important. Ça permet à nos autorités de voir également que la sécurité maritime peut générer des sources d'argent pour l'État. Next. Au plan régional et sous-régional, l'architecture de Yaoundé est vraiment le modèle que nous avons donné donc pour pouvoir lutter contre la criminalité maritime. Cette architecture a l'avantage d'exister. Elle se met en place progressivement et elle peut déjà compter à son actif quelques succès, notamment les opérations conjointes qui ont été réalisées dans la zone D, entre le Cameroun et Sao Tomé, et la signature dans le mois de juillet dernier du mémorandum d'entente entre les États donc, de la zone F. Dans ce cadre-là, des opérations conjointes donc, de lutte contre la criminalité maritime sont prévues entre le Ghana et la Côte d'Ivoire. Next, please. Au plan international, je pense qu'ici tout le monde connaît donc au Bangame Express, le Grand Nemo, également qui sont donc des exercices qui permettent donc à nos États de travailler ensemble et donc d'acquérir des automatismes pour pouvoir faire face à toute cette criminalité-là. L'appui donc de nos partenaires est extrêmement stratégique, mais il faut que nous puissions aller maintenant à un certain niveau. Donc, quelles sont les différentes réponses que l'on pourrait avoir? Next, please. Nous allons d'abord essayer d'évaluer un peu ce qui se fait aujourd'hui au niveau régional et sous-régional. L'architecture de Yaoundé, je l'ai dit, c'est une architecture qui a l'avantage d'exister, d'être clairement définie, d'être clairement hiérarchisée et qui prend également en compte les intérêts des États de l'Interland. Les opérations conjointes sont menées, le partage d'informations est effectif à travers donc les différents centres et le renforcement des capacités se fait aujourd'hui à travers un certain nombre d'instituts, l'ISMI en Côte d'Ivoire pour les francophones et le RMU donc au Ghana pour les anglophones. Il y a par contre quelques faiblesses que nous pouvons noter. La première pour moi, ce serait le manque d'appropriation donc par nos autorités. Nous faisons des déclarations, nous prenons des stratégies qui sont toutes belles sur le papier, mais à l'application, il y a beaucoup de couacs. Donc nous interpellons un peu nos différents responsables pour comprendre que la sécurité maritime, c'est vrai, a besoin de textes, a besoin de déclarations, mais la sécurité maritime a besoin plus encore d'actes. Les ressources financières sont la grosse plaie de nos différentes architectures. Nous n'avons pas beaucoup de moyens, mais il nous faut réfléchir à de nouveaux moyens. Comment capter donc les fonds qui sont générés par le commerce maritime? Il appartient aux États africains d'abord de réfléchir, de regarder ce que nous avons comme richesse et de pouvoir prendre une infime partie dans un certain domaine, pas forcément de créer de nouvelles taxes, mais de travailler sur les taxes déjà existantes pour pouvoir financer donc tout ce qui est relatif à la sécurité maritime. Les ressources financières insuffisantes, bien sûr, vont de pair avec le fait que nous n'avons pas également de moyens, notamment les moyens hauturiers. Nous n'avons pas d'hélicoptères, nous n'avons pas d'avions dédiés, alors que la sécurité maritime ne peut se faire qu'avec la coordination de ces différents vecteurs-là. Donc, comment avoir les moyens pour le faire? C'est également, je pense, la solution qu'on pourrait trouver avec un fonds donc, qui pourrait nous permettre donc, de faire la sécurité maritime. Les centres ont été créés, mais à ce jour, le personnel est insuffisant. Il faut que nous ayons des personnes extrêmement bien formées pour pouvoir donc armer ces centres-là et prendre les décisions, poser les actions qu'il faut pour lutter contre l'insécurité maritime. Le dernier point, et qui est peut-être pas le moindre, c'est celui donc de la justice, des acteurs de la justice. Nous pouvons faire de belles opérations, capturer donc les criminels en mer, mais lorsque nous les ramenons à terre, si nous n'avons pas une justice à la hauteur, il va sans dire que le travail qui aura été fait en mer aura été fait pour rien. Donc quand nous ramenons les criminels à terre, que nous ayons une justice qui connaît le milieu maritime, qui connaît la complexité des problèmes liés au milieu maritime et qui peut prendre donc des décisions vraiment exemplaires. Cela nous amènera à diminuer donc l'insécurité dans nos eaux. Next, please. La dernière partie de mon intervention va parler donc des gardes armés à bord des navires. Alors c'est un problème auquel nous sommes confrontés. Pour pouvoir lutter, on veut nous proposer donc de mettre des gardes armés à bord des navires qui donc viendraient dans nos eaux territoriales pour protéger bien entendu les intérêts. Alors c'est une solution qu'il faut prendre avec beaucoup de pincettes, parce qu'elle ne peut pas s'appliquer dans nos États comme elle s'est appliquée donc dans le golfe d'Aden. La situation est totalement différente. Les États sont jaloux de leur souveraineté et les États, aujourd'hui, lorsque j'ai posé des questions pour pouvoir préparer cette présentation, ceux à qui j'ai posé la question, la tendance est à dire non. Nous sommes des États indépendants, nous avons des marines, nous avons des acteurs qui peuvent intervenir, donc laissez ces États jouer leur rôle. Il ne nous appartient pas de venir assurer la sécurité dans les eaux des autres États, mais il vous appartient plutôt de nous aider à construire des marines fortes, à construire des administrations maritimes fortes qui aient les moyens elles-mêmes d'assurer leur sécurité dans leurs eaux. Alors vous voyez donc le Togo, le Ghana, le Cameroun, le Nigeria et la Côte d'Ivoire ont tous refusé, bien refusent tous, donc qu'il y ait des gardes armés à bord des navires dans leurs eaux territoriales. Next, please. Alors, quelques propositions, ce serait, comme je l'ai dit, donc l'appropriation de la lutte contre la criminalité par les Africains eux-mêmes d'abord. Si nous-mêmes, nous ne trouvons pas les solutions, si nous-mêmes, nous ne nous mettons pas au premier plan, il va sans dire que les propositions qu'on va nous faire ne seront pas forcément adaptées à nos différentes réalités. Donc, c'est à nous, Africains, d'être imaginatifs, c'est à nous, Africains, donc, de donner des propositions innovantes pour qu'aujourd'hui, la sécurité maritime soit d'abord notre propre problème. La mise à disposition de moyens financiers, logistiques et humains, j'en ai déjà parlé, le renforcement des capacités, notamment des magistrats, l'assèchement des sources de financement de la piraterie, la lutte contre la pauvreté. Aujourd'hui, tout le monde parle de Blue Economy. Blue Economy peut être une porte de sortie, justement, parce que par les différentes actions qui vont être posées dans le cadre du développement d'une économie bleue, on va pouvoir lutter contre la pauvreté dans nos États. Si on lutte contre la pauvreté, à partir de ce moment, on peut assécher donc une source de financement donc, de la piraterie et empêcher donc certaines personnes d'aller en mer parce qu'elles vivent dans une pauvreté extrême. La coopération internationale qui aujourd'hui également nous rassemble est extrêmement importante, mais il faut une coopération mieux structurée pour éviter qu'on ne retrouve les mêmes exercices, les mêmes opérations menées souvent de manière, je pourrais dire, parallèle et qui ne nous profitent pas réellement. Next, please. Voilà. Donc, merci, monsieur le modérateur. Juste une petite conclusion pour dire qu'il faut vraiment nous approprier la lutte contre la criminalité maritime. La lutte contre la criminalité maritime ne doit pas être perçue comme un luxe pour nous. C'est vrai qu'elle coûte cher, mais il vaut mieux payer pour pouvoir avoir la sécurité plutôt que de nous laisser piller par des personnes qui proviennent d'autres pays. La confiance, la transparence dans le partage des informations, une meilleure coordination, bien entendu, donc de la coopération internationale. Nous avons un diamant bleu entre nos mains. C'est à nous de savoir l'exploiter pour le bien-être de tous, car pour moi, la mer est le futur de la Terre. Je vous remercie.
Please put your hands together for her. Thank you, Lieutenant Colonel Ake. Thanks for the linkages again between piracy and other crimes, and for way forward issues of ensuring that the navies within the Gulf of Guinea organize exercises and training that will improve capacities. Because, like she referred to the Obangame Express, that has left a huge footprint on the landmarks, on the strikes of navies during such exercises. It also helps to expose the various lacunas in tactics and exercises. It assists in building capacity with the individual navies that are participating. And so she wants to encourage the navies in West Africa to be able to do these exercises without any interference from foreign navies. However, The assistance of foreign navies are sustainable and they should be encouraged. Thank you very much, Ake. I'd like to call on Gilles Chalamon from Total to please come to the podium and add value to the discourse. Gilles. How does it work? That should move it forward. No, this way. Okay.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. A very short time to browse a large issue, and I will try to. I hope that my presentation will reflect where is the role of the oil and gas sector on this problematic. So first of all, a few words about Total. Total, it's 60 years of presence in Nigeria as an energy producer and provider. We have about 20 major assets at sea and a certain number of LNG carriers and oil tankers chartered to different countries of the Gulf of Guinea. And what I would like to highlight is that as a private industrial actor, we, however, are taking part to the maritime security of this area. So the main issue was the future of maritime security and main capabilities. So to understand the futures, to see towards the future, we must understand the present time, and I don't understand how that system works, actually. Okay, so what do we notice as a private industrial actor in the Gulf of Guinea is a certain evolution of the maritime threat through its volatility nature. So what we've seen over the last 5 years was that the threat moved slightly toward the east, to make it short, from the Bayelsa state towards River State. No significant evolution in terms of figures, but some significant evolution over the fact that in last year we noticed more incidents beyond 30 nautical miles. That means more distance, of course. And during the first quarter 2019, we noticed an increased firepower from the attackers, becoming more violent, more organized, and showing more determination. That means that facing more determination from the attackers, we must show more determination as well. Next, please. So again, I'll try to make it short throughout some indications, but I would like to go directly to the point. Next, please. Next. So, Total at sea. Again, the main idea I would like to highlight is that we are taking part to the security in the Gulf of Guinea. This is where we have our main assets. As I mentioned before, about 20 major assets at sea, offshore. Some are quite close to the coast, and some are at a longer distance. And in order to ensure the best possible security, of course, we have implemented a system of security management, which is based first on surveillance capabilities. Next. Surveillance capabilities throughout a vessel monitoring and alert system, which is called VMS. It's a this is a technology. We are able to cover a large surveillance area, almost 120 nautical miles in depth. And this is something we monitor daily. This is a permanent surveillance system that we have developed on a standalone mode. And when we are talking about future improvement and possibility of improved capabilities, this is something that actually, technically, we could share in future. We have invested, we have developed this kind of technology. Today we are using it for our own security purpose, and this is something that we could share among the security communities within the Gulf of Guinea. Can you please go back to the previous slide? Those different capabilities which are mentioned on this slide are actually our base ground of our security management system. Our security management system relies on 4 main capabilities, which we call the 5 Ds. To deter, which means no tolerance with piracy. And this is something we must share with the host nation. No tolerance at all. Next capability, to detect. An early warning system, I have already detailed what it is. And this is something actually we can develop and we can even improve by integrate this system and share the system with other actors. To deny, which is to provide an immediate response. Again, I want to underline where is the role of a private oil and gas company in the denying capabilities. We actually implement non-lethal and defensive response. This is our modus operandi. We want to preserve human life and we want to provide adapted and appropriate response to the threat. The armed response, this is not in our field of capabilities. The armed response is at the host country and regional international forces in international waters. Next capability is to delay, which means we must discourage pirates by disrupting their attacks. And we have implemented some measures to do that as an immediate response when we are attacked. And the last capability requirement, which is not the least, is to defend, to make the target inaccessible. And we do that throughout our defensive measure, equipment, and the implementation of safe haven on our platform. So our guiding principle for now and for the future, it will remain the same, to fulfill these 5 requirements at acceptable cost in order to minimize exposure and preserving human life. Next, please. Next one. So that's the kind of measures and equipment we implement on board. Next. And this is what we are studying at the moment. And this is the immediate future. We want to decrease human life exposure, to improve efficiency, to have a better impact on our environment. And we want to achieve that throughout the implementation of the new technology, which will be in our inner perimeter of operation, this smart workboat project. This is an autonomous boat which is designed for our asset protection at sea. And this is under development, and we hope to be able to start our operational test by the end of next year. And of course, the Nigerian waters will be the best field for experimentation and operation in the near future. Next. What I want to resume through this illustration is that the future of maritime security for the industrial sector will be based on clear sharing of responsibility, clear sharing of level of response. We want to really put in place a coordinated and proportionate system of response against the piracy within our perimeter of activity, in coordination with the sovereign host state, and that will go throughout the implementation of clear coordination regulation that will be achieved with the implementation of new technology, and especially new technology allowing the whole security community in the Gulf of Guinea, allowing all those people to share the appropriate information in order to face the threat, which is actually on the trend of acquiring actually more capabilities as well. So that was my main message, and I hope and hopefully it was clear for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill. Maritime security is about the efforts of the main agency, Nigerian Navy, please, this is just a reminder that participants should not forget to leave on the seats their headsets, please. The organizers have just mentioned here that they lost 20 sets yesterday. So please, as you take your bags away, offload them, put back on the seats the handsets, please. They'll be required throughout the period and duration of this conference. Thank you. Thank you, Jill. Jill, maritime security can only be enhanced through the integration of this proliferation of systems, technology that we've deployed over Nigeria's maritime domain and by extension over the Gulf of Guinea. I hope that Nigerian Navy, with the concert of all the maritime law enforcement agencies and other security agencies, can integrate the various systems, share information and intelligence, put in place a harmonized system of reporting and what have you, and be able to, of course, coordinate adequate response so that we can continue like we have conducive maritime environment for economic activities and development. The last, but by no means, Miss Dexeka Ursula will come and give us our views on our topic. Please welcome for me, as you put your hands together, Ursula.
Okay, Thank you. Good afternoon. We switched from morning to afternoon. Hope everyone is still awake and fresh. So, similar to some of the other panelists, I will focus my remarks on maritime piracy. But I do want to highlight, as also some of my co-panelists did, that there are other important threats to maritime security, including but not limited to IUU fishing, to smuggling, to human trafficking, etc. It just so happens that I'm currently writing a book on piracy, and so what better opportunity than actually share some of the insights from the book with you here today. Also, I'm currently actually writing the chapter on Nigeria, so your comments and feedback can still be most helpful for developing that further. So, why, can we go to the next slide? I guess to this audience, I don't have to explain why we should study piracy. I think this is something that will be apparent to all of you, particularly the economic costs is something that we're all very aware of. Reputational costs are another one that I think, particularly for the Nigerian government, weigh heavily. I think we know less about the human cost, the cost to seafarers, the cost to people who are actually exposed to attacks, who are afraid of attacks, who live with the psychological consequences of attacks. And the reason for why we know less about this is that most seafarers come from very poor countries, countries like the Philippines. I think if more ship crew would be Europeans, we might also understand these consequences a lot better. But based on the research that there is, we know that the psychological consequences are actually quite serious. So the book that I'm writing is actually a comparative project, meaning that we want to understand conditions leading to piracy, not just in the Gulf of Guinea, but also more broadly speaking, including other countries. And a lot of the research that I've already done actually focuses on Indonesia, which historically is one of the countries most affected by piracy, but which has recently actually made a lot of progress in reducing its incidence. And so what I'm going to try and do also in my short remarks here today is see whether we can draw on those insights and also apply them to Nigeria. That's perhaps a bit unusual because I think the more common comparison is actually with Somalia. However, I think if we think about what kind of a state Nigeria is, then I think it's probably closer in terms of capacity to Indonesia than it is to Somalia, which I think is just a very different environment. Very quickly, when I talk about piracy, I'm including piracy in its international legal meaning, but I'm also including armed robbery at sea in territorial waters. Just for clarification, one restriction that we apply is that we actually require piracy to involve 2 ships, so similar to how UN clause defines it. Next slide. So as you saw in the title of my presentation, we think that governance, tells us something crucial about understanding piracy. And that isn't to say that there aren't other important reasons for why piracy happens. Economic explanations, I think, are crucial. Without economic deprivation, I think it's impossible to understand why someone would decide to become a pirate in the first place. Of course, geography matters, right? You just look at the complexity of the Niger Delta and the complex geography, but that's not something that we can change. So I also think it's more fruitful to focus on dimensions that we can actually influence. So the argument that we're making in the book really consists of 2 parts. And the first part is that while regional dimensions matter, we actually think the national state is still very important for understanding piracy. Because national capacity tells us something about how much piracy or how much criminality will be acceptable to the state. And it just seems reasonable to assume that in weak states, that level is higher than, let's say, in strong European states. However, in failed states, that level acceptable, the level of piracy acceptable would be the highest. So that's also why in Somalia we saw this huge explosion of piracy, because there simply wasn't a state to do something about it. While in comparison, Nigeria and also Indonesia, the state that I know more about, they have historically also intervened when criminal problems got out of hand. But then we also argue that, well, looking at national capacity is incomplete. To actually really understand which locations and why those locations experience piracy, we actually need to look at local governance. And to illustrate that point, I'm showing you two maps here. They're not quite as nice as some of the maps that my co-panelists were showing you. But the map on the left actually shows you a part of the coastline in Indonesia, and it's the part bordering the Strait of Malacca, which historically is the area most affected by piracy. And of course, what we see here is that there is a lot of piracy close to that strait. But there seem to be some clusters. And perhaps that suggests or supports this intuition that there is something about local governance that we need to understand for why particular locations become attractive for piracy. And then on the right, you see the much more familiar map of the Gulf of Guinea and piracy close to it. Slide. So what are the local governance conditions that contribute to piracy? I want to highlight two elements. The first one, emphasizes that actually pirates, in many ways, they're not so different from legal business actors. To engage in piracy, you actually need to be close to some economic activity. You need to be close to some markets and infrastructure to recruit people, to become the foot soldiers. You need to be able to get the equipment necessary for the attacks. You also need buyers, right? Or you need black markets where you can sell what has been stolen in incidents. So that is the first element. The second element then is actually then in other ways, pirates and other criminals are actually very different from legal businesses. And they're different in the sense that they actually need protection. They need protection from someone for their activity to avoid being caught or being captured. And where does this protection come from? Well, it comes from collusion with various actors. And those actors, I would say, are usually state actors and non-state actors. So for the case of Indonesia, where I can speak more confidently, we know that there were state actors involved in piracy. The Navy itself allegedly having committed attacks or in other situations being more tacitly involved. Marine police also have been alleged to be involved in incidents. So state actors play one important role in providing this protection. Other actors that play an important role are non-state actors. So that could be the local community where people know actually where the pirates live, but they don't say anything because they actually also benefit, because pirates actually share some of the loot with them. So this concludes with us, or with me making the case that essentially these two conditions together create what we can think of as an opportunity zone for piracy in places within countries where the state is neither too weak. So, you have the markets and infrastructure necessary, but it's also not too strong in the sense that, there are too many people interested in actually making sure that the activity doesn't happen. Okay? So, and if you have doubts about collusion, then of course there is Donald Trump to tell you that there was no collusion. There's a Trump tweet for everything. I like to use it in teaching as well. But whether we believe him, right, that's a different question. Okay. So now I can draw on what I've been telling you so far to make a brief comparison between Indonesia and Nigeria and identify some similarities but also differences. So when we think about markets and infrastructure, I think it's clear that they're important in both, but the kinds of markets and infrastructure available actually influences the kinds of attacks that we see, the modus operandi. Where in Indonesia, it used to historically be primarily ship hijackings, and also later on switched to oil theft when ship hijackings became too difficult. While in Nigeria, we've seen a shift from primarily oil theft to now more kidnappings. So when it comes to collusion, I already gave you some examples of how this happened in Indonesia. And I think one important difference here in Nigeria is that, of course, there are also allegations of collusion of state officials in Nigeria, local politicians. But I think one aspect that is different from Indonesia is that there's also lots of armed groups, criminal groups, political groups that are engaged or have been alleged to be engaged in piracy. I'll mention one brief point, and I'm almost ready to conclude. So another difference between Indonesia and Nigeria is the level of violence in piracy, which was very, very low in Indonesia, but is much higher in Nigeria. And here, I'd be interested in actually your thinking of why that might be the case, but my intuition would be that the involvement of non-state armed groups in piracy would be the primary factor for this difference. So with that, let me conclude with some ideas for possible solutions. And, as part of this conference now, we've heard about lots of different solutions. There's no shortage of possible solutions. I think also, though, at some point we will have to choose, right? Because money is limited and zero-sum. So maybe some decisions need to be made in terms of which solutions to focus on. So the first one, kind of in line with what I've been talking about, would be to focus on local governance and improving local governance. And that sounds great, right? Until we know how to do that. But so one concrete example that I learned about from Indonesia is that they created a rapid response force as part of the Navy that was also placed precisely in the area that was suffering from most of the piracy. And then they also made sure that the local leadership, the local commander, was actually someone who had a very clean vest and was known as someone who wasn't willing to engage in corruption. And that really seems to have made a difference there. So there might be some concrete examples that we can think of, rather than saying, well, governance is something that we should strive for. And then criminalization is another, I think, important dimension. And as we heard, the Nigerian government has this year taken some important steps by developing this new law on the suppression of piracy. But of course, that then also needs to be followed by arrests, by prosecutions, and actual convictions. Now, challenges, there are also many. Let me highlight two. So something that I've encountered in Indonesia, and based on what I've learned about Nigeria so far seems to be similar, is that a lot of times in these contexts, we have not just one type of criminality, but we have multiple types of criminality. So we have piracy, but then we also have problems with, as we've heard, with trafficking, with smuggling, etc. And so the problem that this creates is that if you narrowly focus on counter-piracy and try to suppress piracy, you might be successful in doing so. But people who used to engage in piracy are simply shifting to other types of criminal activity. And the interviews that I did as part of my research in Indonesia seem to support that, where people who I talked to were former pirates, but when I asked them what they're doing now, they all still were engaged in some other kind of more or less shady activity. So with that, I want to thank you for your attention, and I would be very happy if some of you would like to reach out to me to talk to me more about this project and share with me some of your knowledge and insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ursula. Distinguished invited guests, gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen, you agree with me that Professor Tim Edmonds and very distinguished panelists have added value to our discourse on the future of maritime security. We have less than 12 minutes to go. We'll come to the floor now for comments and questions. Do we have the microphones, please? Ushers, microphones, please stand by. So we'll shift the discussion, and we'll take questions, we'll take comments. Can I have, please indicate if you intend to, yes. Introduce yourself, please, and you have the floor.
Good afternoon, distinguished audience. I am Rear Admiral N.P. Aolo, retired. Let me thank the moderator, the lead presenter, and the panelists for a job well done. Thank you. I have a quick intervention on the all-important issue of maritime security. Now, I think that we're all in agreement that crimes, be it piracy, be it robbery, committed at sea must be conceptualized on land. and the perpetrators themselves do not live at sea, they live on land. I therefore feel that the gap in most of what we have been listening since yesterday has seemed to leave a gap in the area of what happens on land. And one of the presenters also told us that they cannot teach us or tell us what to do in the Gulf of Guinea. Therefore, what should we, the neighboring countries, the countries that are in the Gulf of Guinea, especially when we know that resources are scarce, resources will continue to be scarce, capacity is low, technology is low in Africa. So what are those things we can be doing as countries in the Gulf of Guinea that after this conference, we don't really have to go to the National Assembly to ask for money? What should NPA be doing? What should the Nigerian Navy be doing? What should NIMASA be doing? Our IOCs. I think the areas we should be looking that is cost effective, we should be looking at our jetties, both official jetties, unapproved jetties. We should be looking at our fishing boats, artisanal fishing boats. We should be looking at our IOCs. What are they doing? So that we should concentrate our efforts first and foremost at what happens on land before the perpetrators go to commit their acts at sea. The other proposal I have for the IOCs and for our development partners is this issue of blood diamond. Do we start looking at blood crude oil? Because Nigerian Bonny Light has a characteristics, and when they steal our crude and take it out, should our foreign partners be looking at the kind of crude that goes into their refineries? Let me stop there. Thank you very much, sir.
Hello, everyone. My name is Stella. I'm from Benin. Please, let me continue in French, please. Je suis étudiante en diplomatie et relations internationales et je me spécialise en gestion des relations, en gestion maritime, options sécurité des infrastructures et accès portuaire. Ma première préoccupation, c'est par un endroit des moyens. Depuis hier, tous les conférenciers, ça donne à dire que nous n'avons pas de moyens dans la zone du Golfe de Guinée pour lutter contre la piraterie et l'insécurité en mer. Tout à l'heure, j'ai bien aimé la communication de Madame qui nous vient de la Côte d'Ivoire, parce qu'elle a dit quand les moyens ont été mis, l'État ivoirien a pu sauvegarder ou a pu rentabiliser et a pu se faire pas mal de sous ou pas mal d'argent. Donc c'est un capital. Il est normal de constater que nous avons des ressources qui attirent les pirates et qui attirent le monde entier. Alors, pourquoi nos États et nos dirigeants ne se préoccupent pas essentiellement de pouvoir rentabiliser, de pouvoir s'occuper de tout ce qu'ils ont comme ressources importantes et qui attirent le monde entier? Et pourquoi laisser passer tout cela, laisser je vais les appeler des voleurs ou des bandits, des brigands, venir ramasser tout ceci et se faire de l'argent? Nous avons besoin d'argent et nous avons des ressources que nous ne protégeons pas et qui partent et qui est rentabilisée ailleurs. Je pense que nous devons prendre conscience. Je crois que nos dirigeants doivent d'abord prendre conscience que nous avons de l'argent, sauf que nous ne savons pas comment rentabiliser, comment sécuriser et comment mettre en place des politiques directes. Ce n'est pas seulement des conférences et des attentes pour parler, mais aussi des actions pour pouvoir se faire assez de sous. C'est la première. La deuxième, c'est à l'endroit de Madame, bien sûr. Quand vous parlez de mesures préventives, moi, je veux d'abord parler de la prévoyance, de l'anticipation. J'aimerais aussi bien que vous me développiez un peu, ou que vous me parliez un peu des mesures que la Côte d'Ivoire ou que les autres pays de la zone sont en train de prendre pour pouvoir prévoir, pour anticiper sur tout ce qui nous menace dans la zone. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you. My name is Mike Ibokwe. I'm a senior advocate of Nigeria. I just want to quickly chip in some solutions as a result of what we're talking about here, which the Gulf of Guinea states should look into, and also their international partners. It is true Nigeria has taken a lead in terms of putting in place a legal framework by domesticating some of the relevant international treaties when it comes to suppressing piracy, unlawful acts, and armed robbery at sea. But that is just the beginning of the journey. There's a need for implementation. There's also a need for collaboration and cooperation amongst the Gulf of Guinea states in terms of humanizing their laws and enforcement. One thing I have seen is that even though Nigeria has taken a lead in this respect, you still have a situation where a lot of the Gulf of Guinea states are yet to ratify, let alone implementing or domesticating the relevant treaties. For instance, Cameroon. I was shocked to find out that despite the Cameroon agreement, Cameroon has not ratified any of the SWA conventions. There are two of them, 1988, 2005, and each has a protocol. The danger is that you have a situation where some of these criminals could operate from there in Nigeria and run to Cameroon, but you will not have means, of course, unless there is any extradition, of getting them brought to book. It will continue. Secondly, the issue of capacity. As we have situations where a country like US has interests in the Gulf of Guinea, I am aware that US supports countries
30 seconds, please.
Excuse me, I will soon finish.
30 seconds.
Yes, I will soon finish. Supports countries like Saudi Arabia, Syria, and Israel. I'm of the view that they should do more in terms of providing the necessary platforms to support the navies of these countries, not just in terms of providing technical assistance or information. They should do more than that. Give them money to acquire these vessels so that, like Total is doing, provide necessary infrastructure to be able to fight and destroy this kind of menace. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think I have two. We have just 4 minutes to go. If you promise you make it a minute, fine. So 2 hands. Anybody here? Yes. 2 questions here, 1 minute each. 2 here and comments, 1 minute each. 1 minute each, please.
My name is Mrs. McFoy, CEO Ocean Deep Services Limited. I haven't talked so much about this maritime security. Question that stands to us is this. The origin, what is the origin of this piracy and all these insurgencies that we're having? Has it been looked at? Who are the cartels involved in this? Because no matter what equipment you bring out, what collaboration and all that, these people have been there for a very long time and they seem to be a herd. So how can we counter them? Secondly, what is responsible for people or citizens going into this piracy? Is it hunger, poverty? And what are the alleviation methods that should be put on ground to stop this cartel from constantly and continually recruiting this young generation to be in this business? Thank you.
Thank you.
Je suis le capitaine de vaisseau Alain Kouangoulou. J'étais des opérations maritimes et commandant du port au Pointe-Noire au Congo-Brazzaville. Je commencerai par féliciter les orateurs tour à tour, la qualité des interventions. Et je voulais juste dire que, à ce jour, la problématique de l'économie bleue, des questions à la sécurité maritime, c'est un monde en développement chaque jour. Et avec donc les experts que nous avons suivis ce matin, Je voulais juste demander une seule chose.
I'd like to ask a question.
Quel serait, à votre avis, le déclic utile et nécessaire qui pourrait faire justement que nous puissions venir à bout de cette question de la criminalité maritime, la piraterie, justement dans le Golfe guinéen, vu que nous avons quand même quelques exemples dans le Golfe d'Aden et ailleurs où ces choses, ces phénomènes ont été, à défaut d'être éradiqués, mais ont trouvé des grandes solutions. Je vous remercie.
Okay, please come this way. This way, please. This way, this way. Sorry. Okay. 10 seconds.
Thank you very much.
10 seconds.
Yes. My name is George Wilcox. I'm a youth advocate. I want to say this. We have maritime institutions that one time or the other are recruiting students or training students. And at the end of the day, these students would graduate and have no jobs. And for one reason or the other, they are well acquainted now with the sea, the nooks and the crannies, as the case may be. And the other side, the people that are from the coastal line, like I'm from Bayelsa now, the Niger Delta region, naturally, we acquaint ourselves by the beauty of nature, which enables us to know the nooks and crannies of the sea. Now, in terms of job unemployment, what do you think will be done at us? Or what do you think will be our reciprocation when we already know the systems, as long as sea piracy and the rest are concerned? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Very important question. Very important question. Yesterday we had a session on blue economy, and I remember Dr. Kafo mentioned that we did not have to buy peace, but to develop peace. Those graduates from Maritime Academy, I hope that you'll have more opportunities than now as we develop the economy we acquire more vessels. You have placements on those vessels, but government has a responsibility to adopt the blue economic strategy, the strategies outlined yesterday, to take it to the highest echelon of governance, the executive, and of course the legislature, to see how we can have the direct buy-in and of course harvest the full benefits of the blue economy. If we do that, issues raised by that young man will be a thing of the past. We need to start developing peace, not buying it through imbibing, of course, the tenets of blue economy. Yes, sir.
Good afternoon. My name is Diko Tahir Bala. I'm the Nigerian alternate permanent representative to IMO. In your presentation, you mentioned 3 incidences: Togo, Cameroon, and Nigeria. And that confirms the fear that we have from incidences that are reported, because there's no classification. So, and in your recommendations or suggestions, you made 3 suggestions. What we think should be done is the GCs. I'm happy that the IMO officials are here. The GCs platform where incidences are reported, so have classification for us to know what kind of crime actually had happened on those vessels. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Our time is almost up. Allow me to have the panelists, half a minute each, respond to some of the agitations of the audience or answers to some of their questions. Let's start with Dyke, because your name was directly mentioned. Dyke.
Thank you. Just as a very quick answer to very complicated questions, and I thank you all for the input. But one thing that I think is needed and that would be very, very helpful in the future, both short-term, medium-term, and long-term, is to have more transparency. And transparency coming from law enforcement agencies, navies across the Gulf of Guinea region, but also from the private sector, from shipping companies, from charterers, etc. Because the opposite of transparency And that cuts right across to the implementation of laws. The opposite of transparency is ambiguity. And as I think every African in the room will know, there are perfectly good laws in place in most countries throughout the region. For example, Nigeria has good laws against kidnapping, etc. Yet how many kidnappers have been arrested and tried over the past couple of years? So be transparent about the rules and laws and regulations that you have, and also about the capabilities. For the past, I think, 5 or 6 years, I've been reading annual articles how the Nigerian Navy is fighting against maritime crime and how the crime numbers have depleted. So surely maritime crime must be gone by now. But we wouldn't be sitting here if that was the case. So there is a lack of transparency, and there is a lack of admitting that, yes, there are problems. And yes, it is embarrassing. And it's the same for the shipping industry. We heard representatives from the shipping industry this morning saying that the maritime industry is affected, they're the victim. And yes, that's the case. I have no doubt that the vast majority of shipping companies want to make money, want to protect seafarers. Yet there are companies and yet there are seafarers who are involved in not so legal activities. And both sides have to come together, be more transparent, be open, and I think that would help to build a lot of trust in the short, medium, and long term. And that would go a long way to addressing these problems. Doesn't solve all capability issues, but it certainly helps to involve a lot of these problems that we're discussing here yesterday and today. Thank you.
Bien, merci à la dame du Bénin. Donc, il demande pourquoi est-ce que nos États ne se préoccupent pas de rentabiliser donc les richesses du milieu maritime. Il faut dire que c'est vrai, nos ressources maritimes sont extrêmement importantes. Le golfe de Guinée est riche. C'est peut-être ce qui attire donc la convoitise de toutes ces personnes qui viennent donc piller nos eaux. Et on a l'impression effectivement que nos États n'ont pas encore véritablement pris conscience donc de cette richesse qui pourrait être tirée donc de la mer. Pourquoi? Parce que le domaine maritime n'est pas pour l'instant une priorité. Ça demande tellement d'investissement, tellement d'argent que nos États souvent ont des priorités plus immédiates. Ils préfèrent aller vers ce qu'ils connaissent que vers ce qu'ils ne connaissent pas, parce que le milieu maritime est vraiment méconnu. Il n'y a pas beaucoup d'études qui sont faites au niveau même des Africains pour connaître les réelles potentialités qui se trouvent donc dans nos eaux. Donc pour nos dirigeants, investir dans le domaine maritime pour payer des navires à coût de millions sans être sûr qu'on puisse avoir un retour sur investissement, je dirais, ça pose quelques problèmes. En ce qui concerne les mesures préventives à prendre, pour moi, il faut parler de communication déjà. Il faut communiquer autour du domaine maritime, communiquer autour donc des potentialités qu'il y a dans le domaine maritime et une communication à tous les niveaux. En parler aux jeunes, en parler aux politiques, en parler aux administratifs, mettre en exergue tout ce que nous pouvons tirer donc de notre milieu maritime. Et aujourd'hui, l'économie bleue devient une passerelle. Il y a beaucoup de séminaires qui sont organisés autour de l'économie bleue, parce que l'économie bleue nous permettra donc de lutter contre la pauvreté de notre population. Il y aura de la création d'emplois, on va pouvoir permettre aux femmes, aux jeunes, donc de trouver du travail, notamment dans le milieu de la pêche, notamment dans des énergies renouvelables, qui bien sûr nécessitent énormément de moyens. Mais lorsque on va investir, je pense qu'on pourra récolter beaucoup de fruits. Le texte juridique, il faut que nous ayons des textes donc, qui incriminent donc ces différentes infractions-là, qui prévoient donc des peines et qui peuvent être réellement appliquées. Et dernier point, le renforcement de capacité. Voilà.
And that would be it. So this is the panel, the third panel session at the
Thank you very much, team, and my distinguished panelists. Thank you, audience, for being kind enough to stay into the extra time. We're very pleased. Please put your hands together for the lead speaker and the panelists, and to yourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Moderator. We have a token to appreciate our panelists with, please, if you would indulge me. Whilst the tokens come close, please could you rise for a group photograph at the center? Thank you, sir. Where should they stay? Where? Here, please. Over here. Mm-hmm. We don't open them. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so this is the fourth panelist session at the Global Maritime Security Conference in Abuja. It had a 5-man panelist, and their discussion was future of maritime security, threats, emerging threat vectors, and capability requirements. On the lead speaker was the Professor Timothy Edwards, Professor of International Security and Director of Global and Security Centers at the university, where he identified that the key problem is the application of the different strategies, and said one of the key solutions to this is capacity building both on land and sea, and also to see that kingpins as well as foot soldiers are put in place. Following briefly was Gil Challenging, who is also a security expert with the Corporate Security Division Total Group, Daxka Usla, who is an associate professor of political science at University of Amsterdam, and the moderator was Mr. Adekola Oyenuga, CEO AO Blue Economy and Energy Consulting.
Thank you. Please appreciate them once again. Thank you for your patience and your time. Please be advised that we have complimentary copies of the pictures we've been taking since yesterday. If you're interested in picking a hard copy, red carpet is outside toward the right. Please do well to pass by and pick your pictures. If you are trying to make changes to your flight tomorrow, if you're changing time, please alert us at the Secretariat. The Secretariat is very close to the Executive Hall. The Secretariat is right here outside, close to the Executive Hall. Lunch is served now. For our panelists and our speakers, when we go out to the foyer, we go left. For those who have cards for Bainway Hall, please be advised to go to Bainway Hall. All women in Maritime who are here present, please, we need you just at the foot of the stage here for a quick picture together. And finally, the rest of us together, there's lunch on the right and upstairs, out in the foyer, out on the right and upstairs. We'd like to appreciate the presence of the representative of the Honorable Minister of Technology. He is Director of Agriculture and Agro-Allied Department, Raw Materials Research and Development Council, Abuja, Dr. B.O. Olugbemi. Thank you so much for being here with us. And there is an iPad here with me. If it is yours, if you're missing your iPad, please bring proof that it is yours. Show us your police report, your BVN, your mother's maiden name, and all the other questions. If you're missing your tablet, it's not an iPad, it's actually it's a tablet. You tell us more about the specs and we'll hand it over to you. Thank you so much. We are reconvening for the next sessions after lunch at 2:15. At 2:15, we're convening for our last sessions. Please check your page 35. Page 35 has the session and the location. Please check the session and location. See you at 2:15. And once again, be reminded to leave the headsets right on your seats, please. Headsets, please leave them on your seats. Thank you.
Okay, so I like to also say that we're still at the Global Maritime Conference 2019, and I'd like us to talk to Dr. And she's just going to tell us the risk.
Security threat.
One of the things when you were talking about, you preferred some of the solutions you think might it is required to have a safer waterways. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, so the two solutions that I mentioned were to make improvements for local governance and also to work on the criminalization of piracy and also successful prosecution of pirates. And I think if we had to choose among the many possible ones, those are the two that I think might be most useful to focus on, because also based on what I've learned about how successful counter-piracy in Indonesia, because those are two areas where they definitely made a lot of improvements. You know, the example that I already mentioned in my presentation, creating a quick response and positioning that unit in the area most affected by piracy. So I think that might be one, possible example.
When you were talking about the variations in Indonesia. We're in that some of the what kind of implementations are we talking about here that you think can be deficient in? Yes.
Yeah, so of course everything is always context specific, right? So I think that's a really difficult question, and I don't know enough yet about the Gulf of. But organization was also another aspect that Indonesia actually does. The regular, but they were successful in making arrests, and not just making arrests, but also prosecute, and then months, years later, that someone was caught. Everything, but they had actually been convicted before, yeah. So they had been released early. So there was also concerns about, and so some of the rights what you hear. Essentially, right now the issue in Nigeria, there are some arrests, there are no prosecutions and convictions, and so to me that seems like an area to.
So I'd like to this your Nigeria, and what's your appraisal of the Global Maritime Security Summit?
This is the second time in Nigeria. Very nice for me, right? Because as I was saying, I'm working now on this chapter in Nigeria, and so this is an excellent opportunity for me to network, make connect, actually knowledge. I'm still developing.
Okay, now let's talk about the book. Though it's not yet out, when do we expect it to come out?
It takes forever in academic publishing. I would say probably 2021. Okay. So not even next year, I think. Maybe next year, but that's the earliest. Yeah, because we're also still working on this chapter that I mentioned. The rest of the book is pretty much done.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming. Thank you. I appreciate it.
prospect consultant.
We're the moderator for this session. I want to find out, at the end of the day, one of the solutions they preferred was for land and sea communication. Can you talk more about the solution?
Also, security is only talking about. So we see the cells are widely distributed in the Gulf of Guinea. There has this tendency to collude amongst themselves. So whilst we go to the sources on land, we must begin to break the link between the cells, the piracy cells, sea robbery cells that have this tendency to collude from Angola right up to Senegal. That they've established. That way you can weaken their resolve. But not just that alone. You can't do that in isolation. We must develop our institutions, strong institutions, strong governance principles. That way you can weaken their resolve to go back there and commit some crimes.
Another thing, when they were having the discourse, they also talked about the need for transparency in terms of communications, and they talked about different strategies to combat sea piracy and then armed robbery. They said there were two different. Could you on that, please?
You mean transparency and governance?
Yes.
In whatever, when you have treaties or articles or MOUs like this, one of the key components for survival is transparency. You must open up. When information becomes intelligence and you are sharing, you must give those who share with you every aspect of that intelligence so that they can respond appropriately. Transparency in intelligence sharing is key. You must bring out all the details, okay? To go through what they are, but you must bring out all the details, and that helps the recipient of that information or intelligence to act and respond appropriately. So transparency is key.
What's your final note, sir?
I hope that this will not be a jamboree as other conferences. I've attended a lot of them throughout my career and since I left service. And the problem we've had is the inertia and the zeal to implement the outcomes of the conferences. I hope that we'll talk less after this and act more. Everybody is like, look, we need to do more, and that is the truth. That is the truth. Implement more of conference outcomes. We're not short of mandates. We're not short of acts. We're not short of agreements or agreement or MOUs. We are short of actions to make them work. That's my take.
Thank you very much.